Random game. Game start. Hi guys, Spanners here. I'm your host, and we will be talking about some of our season highlights. We've asked you patrons to get in touch and tell us what were your highlights and lowlights. And we're going to be talking about the rest of the grid that weren't Red Bull and McLaren. Because I did say to the panel last week, 20 minutes maximum on the title fight because it's a big grid. But you know, then Matt and Stuffy happened. But today we will be discussing Ferrari. They'll come into focus, and some of the guys that have been I think, overlooked in their departing from Formula One. And the F1 news cycle insists on carrying on. It is cycling more and more. So we are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed. With the kind permission of our patrons and partners, we aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. I don't do these things alone, you know. I'm joined in the shed by Matt Trumpets. Hello, Matt.
Hey there, Spanners. It is a delight to be here as an officially minted niche internet micro-celebrity.
Oh, you were recognized in a pub and everything.
I was recognized by a whole Canadian, I'll have you know.
In the wild. And our next guest, Chris Stevens, has been recognized on the tube before.
Yeah, that was a random one. I was fully conked out, like head over the back of the seat and everything, and somebody woke me up and was like, "Are you Chris?" And I was too tired to really gather what he was saying, but he was listening to the show at that very moment.
I think I'm the least recognized part of the panel. I went to a karting event with Brad and Alex, and they got recognized as Missed Apex people, and I didn't. But we have in the past, I think all of us had people say, "Oh, I saw you at such and such a place, but I didn't want to bother you." Always bother us. We always want to speak to you guys. So, Matt, what do you think we're going to start with today? Because there is a bit of news, but I think last week we did end up, I think, understandably focusing on the title contenders. I think I really want to talk about some of the guys we're losing from Formula One. So I want to start with, before we go to Ferrari and the listener highlights, lowlights, talking about Bottas and Magnussen.
Okay, so now that you've asked me what we're going to talk about and answered the question on your own, how about we talk about the drivers, at least temporarily, leaving Formula One?
That's a great idea, Matt. We should do that, yeah.
Yeah, well, would you like to start with Kevin Magnussen then?
I think so, yeah. Magnussen has been one of my favourites in his career in Formula One. And not every rising star comes in and sets the world alight, but I think there is an underappreciation generally for what he's achieved in Formula One. Like, took a real good shot, had a shot at a top-ish team, I think performed well and admirably against teammates. And the point we saw him at the end, towards the end, he was, I'm not going to say stealing a living, but he was using the experience and reputation and name and his CV from his time in Formula One to have all that time with Haas. And when it ended, I think we missed this at the time, but there was this radio message from his wife over the team radio. His wife was on over the team radio, and it was almost saying, "Hey, Kevin, come home on your shield. You know, well done. You know, you've been to war. You've gone and you've sacked villages. Just take your treasure and come back to your loving family." And I think like no one can argue with the arc of Kevin Magnussen. As a fan of Kevin Magnussen, I'm pretty pleased generally with how it's gone.
I think Kevin's one of these unrealized stars.
Sure.
Because when he came into Formula One, and he was coming off of the back of a really strong junior career, promoted into McLaren, which, you know, supposedly was meant to be back on the rise in 2014, and nailed it straight off the line with that podium finish, which was, let's be honest, because McLaren had a Mercedes engine for the first turbo hybrid race of the new era. And then it never really clicked after that. He always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He got dropped by McLaren for Fernando Alonso. That wasn't really a one-sided or, you know, conversation, I think. So you would always have Alonso in over Magnussen. Maybe, you know, they could have had Magnussen and Alonso as a partnership. I'd love to have seen how that would have worked out. Still would have been at the wrong place at the wrong time. though, unfortunately. And now he is going back into sports car racing with BMW, a full-fledged BMW driver, and he'll be in action as early as next month at the Daytona 24 Hours.
And that, Chris, like, obviously we focus on the glamour of Formula One, but there's good racing to be had there. And I think that's it's a perfectly good place to go from a Haas. So when you were racing in a Haas, it's not like you were competing for titles and then you go to this different series. And it looks like he's seen this coming as well. So the quickness with which BMW was announced does suggest that has been the plan for a while, and it's all good.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think so. I think didn't they just have to kind of wait for his contract to expire basically before they were allowed to announce it, or they ended up doing their announcement shortly before doing all the other drivers and doing the programs as well. So his main program will be at the World Endurance Championship, and then the endurance events of the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship in America, which includes Daytona, which is a great program, and he will compete for overall victories with that car.
Yeah, I'm going to get on board with. He has long been one of my favorite drivers to watch and to listen to. I mean, his interactions with other drivers, particularly when they're unhappy with him, is always they're always works of art.
Yeah.
But I can really, going back to that radio message from his wife, like, I'm imagining exactly the same tone in which my wife said, "So are you going to be home on Christmas Eve this year after like 28 years of not being home?" It is kind of nice to spend a little time with the family, but I think he got completely toasted unfairly by McLaren. And I think had things gone slightly differently for him, he would be easily where Bottas wound up career-wise, if not even better.
Explain how that could have gone differently.
Well, he was very rapid in his first season, and as Chris pointed out, his very first race ever, he was third, but he wound up, I think, second after, was it Ricciardo got kicked off the podium for Red Bull fiddling about with the...
I think he finished second in that race anyway.
Okay, I might because it was Australia.
It was P3. He finished P3 and was promoted to P2.
That's. I usually don't trust my memory over Chris, but Chris drinks a lot and he's hungover, so
yeah.
And he was very rapid. He did well in qualifying, but he was going up against Jenson Button, and in the races he would do that thing that we get on Leclerc a lot for. He would be very aggressive and he would be very sort of wound up, and he would just wind up making mistakes and crashing. So Button beat him handily, and when Alonso came along, Button wasn't ready to leave. If you're Kevin Magnussen, you're not winning that argument. McLaren kept him around, but then he made the really unfortunate decision, which he may not have had much choice about, to go to Renault, which was really in the doldrums when he went there, and he had a really unfortunate year there. And one of the interesting things he did do was in 2015, the year that he didn't race. He actually talked to Andretti about an IndyCar program. So I know he's racing for BMW, but there's there's at least a history of some talks there, which might see him not permanently out of the sport.
Oh, but he raced for Cadillac as well in IMSA during his first Formula One hiatus. So he has links with another incoming team. Well, the same incoming team. They've been officially renamed now, haven't they, from Andretti to Cadillac Formula Racing?
Yeah, they have. And again, if you're looking at who they might take on, someone with Magnussen's length of experience might not be the worst. But
I think he's done. Right. And
agreed.
He's done. And so there was this rumor about Ricciardo being linked with that Cadillac seat as well. And it's the most short-lived rumor ever, because they reached out to Ricciardo's people and went, no, I'm done. And then someone interviewed him, I guess, for something completely different. I saw it on TikTok somewhere. And they said, "Oh, rumors of you at Cadillac." And he didn't say, "No, I'm not going to Cadillac." He went, "No, I'm done."
It wasn't an interview. It was a fan getting a photo.
Oh, was it? Right. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So this is what I love. Right. So, Formula One journalism now is take the word
Horrendous.
of a fan from TikTok having a 2-second interaction with a driver, and now suddenly those 3 words, "No, I'm done," are plastered all over every single Formula One news outlet. And that's how journalism works these days. And it makes me really sad.
Chris.
But if you are one of these people who is desperately clinging on to the idea that Daniel Ricciardo might have a prodigal return to Formula One, let it go.
It's done. Chris, a bit about journalism. So,
Yeah, go on.
for example, wasn't there the stat that Gasly was the only driver
don't
not
get me-
to do crash damage?
Does that make you angry too, Chris? Does that make you angry too?
Well, okay,
Makes me
so
angry.
as far as I understand it, it's not true. He had some floor damage, and if you don't include floor damage, then Hamilton also falls into that bracket.
The thing is, it's just such an arbitrary
It doesn't matter.
statistic. Well, no, it's not that it doesn't matter. It's that it's so unverifiable. Like, you'd have to go directly to the team and ask them, can you estimate how much damage has been done? And the thing is, you damage it as soon as you hit a bump and take something off the skid block, right? You'll chip the floor at some point. So suddenly then we have to go, oh, well, what counts as damage? And then if somebody smashed into you, does that go into his tally? No, it doesn't, because it's such a ridiculous, stupid thing that came about from an unverified Reddit user. Why are we treating it as gospel?
But it got reported like everywhere. I don't think it's a particularly sound argument. But the thing with Ricardo is, this is the thing I've been whining about for a while, which is, 10, 15 years ago, if you wanted to gain a reputation as being an influencer, and me and Matt, we have direct knowledge and experience with a website that would do this, you find non-English speaking press, particularly the Italian media and Italian bloggers who love chucking stuff out. They have fun with it. It's a different culture of reporting. And then here's the thing: you don't say I've heard a rumor from the Italian media. You say I've had an inside whisper. I've had an inside my little circle of spies, Matt. My little circle of insider spies has told me. And like a psychic, you forget about the ones that didn't come true and you highlight the ones that did come true. And this has become almost ubiquitous. You've got the people like Medland and Nate Saunders and Noble. You've got that layer, Joe Saywood, of course, and literally just under that, anyone who's claiming to have information is just an absolute BS artist at this point.
Well, and the thing is, even if they do, I know for a fact, I've seen stuff from team members that's turned out to be absolutely not true because they weren't in a position to know, for example, the full story.
That's my next whinge. That's my next
that your
whinge.
next
No,
whinge?
my next whinge is when it's like, oh, it came from a person in the team. A team is a massive organization with many, many tiers of info. There's not one line of information where, somebody in HR can talk for Christian Horner. I don't know why I picked Red Bull specifically. I said too much.
I don't know. But back to Magnussen, who we were appraising.
Oh yeah.
It
I have
turns
more
out,
on Magnussen.
and I'm not sitting here saying that I'm doing my research as this discussion is ongoing, but it turns out that the Renault thing was, according to him, entirely his choice to leave, that they did, in fact, even though they denied it, offer him a contract to stay. And he actually said, you know what, this place is so toxic, I think I don't want to. And he went to Haas, where he had a very happy home for many years, except for those 2 years where they had to take on Schumacher and Mazepin.
Well, Haas was a potential, you could say, like the Mercedes gamble for Hamilton, whereas Renault clearly wasn't going anywhere.
I wouldn't go as far as to say it was for the Mercedes.
No,
gamble,
no,
because
but
Mercedes had the
gamble.
ability to be a championship-winning team, whereas Haas was a completely brand new.
No, but by that time, if you go
entry.
back to that time, me and Matt were having massive arguments about Renault. Where
we were arguing.
Matt, you were saying,
No.
I think you were saying, and it's reasonable. This is a manufacturing team. They've got the weight of all this organisation behind them. But I think I was seeing that there was a fight between the F1 team and then getting backing from the main team, and it just didn't seem to be going anywhere.
And it's still going on.
Yes, it's still it's played
10
out
years
perfectly.
later, it's...
and now it's Audi's turn. Audi have looked at that and gone, yeah, we'll have some of that.
So this is the thing. I was about to drive us straight to the next point because
we can
I would
segue,
say-
but we have to come back to Magnussen.
if you are like the Cadillac or the Andretti now, and you want to pick an experienced driver out of the pool who has just left Formula One at the end of this season, you go for Valtteri Bottas, because there is
Oh, I see what you're doing.
every single, ability left in him to be able to do the job.
Yeah. Okay. No. Good. Right. I want to finish.
And that is one of my points too. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to finish up on Magnussen. I think my last point, because EJ.
But we do need to finish Magnussen.
So
'cause there's some things we should still say.
Engvind in our he's a mod in our Discord chat.
You mean Ivan?
That's not how you say it. It's Edgevind.
It is how you say it. I commentated on him in the iRacing
It's
series. Ivan Anderson.
EJVIND. His nickname is EJ, so it's Edgevind. It has to be. Right. Anyway,
Okay.
Edgevind says. So
Avend.
regarding, look, I briefly tried to live in Denmark once, and I've learned 4 or 5 phrases in Danish, so I think I know. Regarding that message from K-Mag's
How
wife...
many of them can you say for a word?
Hold en skyld. Jeg elsker dig. There you go, 2.
How dare you?
That is anatomically impossible. How
one
dare
is
you?
porridge, and one is I love you. Okay, so...
Aww.
So you love porridge. Okay.
I love porridge. I think it speaks a lot more about how much it pains K-Mag to be away from his family, and this is perhaps also proof that there's too many races in the season, or that it's taking a toll on its drivers. Now, remember, Magnussen has 17 kids, and he lost 1/10 of a second for each of those kids. But there is a reason why these kind of careers are young people games. So, my military background as well, when I was there in my 20s, and you don't know where you're going to be. So at least they've got a schedule, but you don't know where you're going to be week to week, month to month. But you look at the calendar ahead and you say, there's not a huge amount of family time. And the absolute kicker was, I was mid-20s, and I looked at the guys who were 30 to 35 or beyond, and they were either a complete mess, or they were going through divorces, or they were really struggling, and their families were having to spend huge amounts of time without them. And there are some careers that just have a shelf life. There are some careers that are better suited to being in your 20s, early 30s. And if you're Kevin Magnussen, you've earned your money from Formula One, you've had a good shake at that stick, there's not a line directly back to the top for you, and you've got 3 kids and a fantastic wife, why not? Why not hang up your gloves, do some racing at still a very, very high level, and go and enjoy life?
So it looks great on paper. On paper, he's doing what? 12 races this year? No, next year, sorry. 12, 13 races. And big endurance events, right? Which is, half as many as he did in Formula One this year. But there's going to be an awful lot of testing as well. So, and think about the Rolex as well, the Daytona 24 Hours. That is a 2-week event. Le Mans is a 2-week event as well, right? So I don't know how much more time he's actually going to end up spending with the family. But yeah, it's still a very high level of competition.
I think the F1 calendar is significantly more than that when you throw in other commitments.
Maybe.
Yeah. I'm going to go with also some of those events are a lot easier to bring your family to. Hey, family,
Probably.
would you like to go to Daytona for 2 weeks in the winter? Why, yes, we would. Thank you very much. Who wouldn't want to do that? Now,
I don't know, it's pretty cold.
The thing we haven't mentioned, the other real highlight, aside from his couple of 5th places when Haas was very competitive early on, was the pole position that he got in Brazil. And to me, that sort of encapsulates what might have been if he just had, if the cards had fallen slightly differently, since we're on the card playing metaphors tonight, apparently. If the cards had fallen slightly differently, that pole position represents where he might have gone with a good upper midfield team, or even a manufacturer. I think he could have had a similar arc to Bottas at the right team at the right time.
Yeah, the card references were pre-show, so make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, so when we go live, you'll be able to catch all our nonsense before we get going with the F1 stuff. But, there's a lot of drivers that fall into the Kevin Magnussen skill range who had better opportunities, who have gone on to win titles. It is not inconceivable that Kevin Magnussen could have been on a path and ended up winning a title. The right car, the right teammate, the right era, you can be Kevin Magnussen and win. And there are other drivers we could name where you go, even with that opportunity, you'd end up being the teammate who didn't win. You'd end up being the Barrichello in the Brawn. scenario, for example, in 2009. Now, Chris, you brought up Bottas.
I did.
I'm increasingly of the opinion that Bottas got one big opportunity and then never got another chance to show what he could do.
100%.
Did you like briefly in his first season in the whatever it was called back then, the Alfa Romeo?
Oh, the Alfa Romeo. Because in
the
2022,
first 6 months, it looked okay.
it was a good car because it was the only car under the weight limit. It was the only team that needed ballast at the time to meet the minimum weight requirements that Formula One had. Because the weight struggles have been consistent throughout the ground effect era.
And during that period, he did look, clear of Joe Guanyu,
Exactly.
but Joe Guanyu was a rookie then.
But Flame was still very much there, the spark and the talent. And he hasn't lost any of that. He's just had the worst car for the last 2 seasons. And I think that if there was an option, say like Audi, for example, having gone with Nico Hulkenberg, what they've gone with, in my opinion, is a less proven Bottas.
But a German less proven Bottas.
Yeah, that's also very true. The correct nationality, but with just less wins and podiums to his record.
Can I slightly argue with that though?
Go for it, please.
Sure.
Okay. I don't think I've. You know when you go, can I argue with that? And I go, no, actually, I'm instantly.
Actually, you're right.
It's a bad sign when both of your other panels are like, yeah, sure, go right.
Yeah, no, you have the floor. Give me a chance here. So I'm going to go for Bottas has had the potential phase where you go, he's an up and comer at Williams, beat Maldonado. Did he beat Massa? He was stronger than Massa, I think. And then Maldonado was next.
No. Maldonado was
it not at the same time?
Pre Massa.
Ah, okay. Anyway, so he had that Williams phase where, he's the protege, he's being managed by Toto Wolff, then gets that shot at Mercedes. And let's be honest, he wasn't as good as Lewis Hamilton, but he had wins, he had strong qualifying results, and, ultimately he was facing what might turn out to be absolute peak Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, definitely peak Lewis Hamilton.
100%.
So history might end up judging him slightly less harshly. And he was like super upfront. What is it that makes Lewis Hamilton better than you? It's the consistency. It's the lap after lap. It's the race after race. And you just go, I've played people like that in sport. And you go, oh, I can hang with you. I can play. I can compete. But you're 15, 20% better in just these key areas. And then after that, he got thrown into complete obscurity, and he's been really honest again, saying my move to Sauber was a mistake. And
that was brutal, wasn't it? What a quote to come out with.
But just say it.
But correctly, I think. I mean, he's essentially saying I moved to this team under what turned out to be false pretenses, because the moment Audi acquired them, and this is never made public, and you're always sort of reading tea leaves or reading between the lines.
Yeah, or guessing.
The moment it became public, it was very clear they wanted a German driver and somebody else, but the thing they weren't going to be interested in was him.
But if you're going to compare him to Hulkenberg, I think you've got more data points with Hulkenberg. So with Bottas, you've actually got this might sound stupid, you've got relatively little data points to judge him on. You've only got the aspirational bit, the up against, like in his prime, possibly the greatest of all time driver in his prime, and then in complete obscurity in a car that has not been invested in at all for the last couple of seasons. Where with Hulkenberg, we can take tangible looks at, right, this is what he was like against Perez, Ocon, who else was he up against?
Ricardo.
Yeah, and you
Magnussen.
go, Magnussen. Yeah, so we've got more data points with him. So if you want a real solid journeyman that knows his way around Formula One, I think we've actually got more information about Hulkenberg than Bottas.
I'm going to argue with
I'm not
that
dying.
a
I'm
lot.
not dying on this hill. So please argue with it.
I'm going to argue with that.
Do it.
I think in terms of the number of people you can compare Hulkenberg to, you'd be correct because he's had more people you could say, well, this is Ricardo at his best. But how many of these people was he racing at their best versus Bottas versus Hamilton? He still took 2 seconds in the drivers, 67 podiums, not all of them with Mercedes, 10 wins, 20 poles, what Bottas has proven is if you put him in that position, he will deliver. And that is the one thing we really haven't quite seen from Hulkenberg.
I don't want to get bogged down on this, and it feels like I'm being anti-Bottas. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm doing this. But okay, so those seasons that he got those results was 2019, 2020, where Ferrari were kind of out of it. Red Bull weren't developing, so
he won races in 2017 as well.
He won
races across his whole tenure. From just my memory of it, I'd have to go back and check.
So my final thing is that you would say Bottas was basically fighting bums up against the very hardest challenge that you could face, arguably, definitely top 3 in Formula One history ever, and then in an unjudgeable position. So it feels like if you have that potential, end up getting generally shown up by the very, very best. And then you have this thing where he didn't put Zhou Guanyu to the sword, which he could have done, but he didn't have the opportunity to. That car was dead last a lot of the time.
Sure.
So it's all about stock, though.
We can make a judgment between the two of them.
No, exactly.
To be fair.
Exactly. And he's got to 35 years old, and we haven't been able to make a judgment about him, whereas you can exactly make a judgment about Hulkenberg. Ooh, I think I might be on... I know I've lost this argument. I know I have, but I think I've made a reasonable case.
I think you've made a reasonable case for why they might have gone with Hulkenberg, or at least how they could make it look good to their corporate board, which is, let's face it, what this is all really about anyway. The thing with Sauber is I think the decision early on that they wanted a German driver, and that would be a veteran driver because that's who they want to get the good results, meant that Bottas was out early, and what development there was really going to be aimed more at Joe to see if he could come up to whatever level they might want. Whoever was making the decisions for Audi, whoever's looking at this. And let's also remember how chaotic Audi has been and their management of this team, how little money has been spent on it. So when I say you can't make a judgment between Joe and Bottas, what I mean is it's very likely Joe was getting more favorable treatment than Bottas. We don't really know. But I would hesitate to say with certainty that they had the same car, they had the same material support, and that Joe actually beat Bottas entirely on merit. You know what I'm saying? It's like, to me, it's a little bit of uncertainty still surrounds it.
Bottas was a better TikToker than both Joe and Hulkenberg, though.
Joe gave it a good go. Joe was a good sport. Joe was a good sport, though. Joe Guanyu was a good sport. Do you follow the States?
I like them both.
Social media,
honestly.
Can I just say though, you wanted to do the farewells. You've listed Bottas and Magnussen, but you didn't put Joe in the list.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good point. I literally
because no one's gonna miss him.
He was on the list last week.
Okay.
To be fair, that's just a cut and paste error.
No, I think I'm well documented on why I have no real issue with Zhou Guanyu, because we have these buy-in drivers, and not all of them are as blatant as Zhou Guanyu. I don't think they've taken as much effort to disguise it and run it through subsidiaries as some other drivers. So if you're going to come in that pay driver role, don't be sticking it in the wall. He's come across great. I think he's been professional about it, and I think he'll end up having a continued role in Formula One in some way or another. And he can leave in the context that he's joined Formula One. He can leave with his head held high. He can go, well, look at my record against Bottas. I've been fine. I've not done crash damage. You can trust me in your car. That's fine.
So the reason all the rumors about him joining Ferrari as the third driver, which is basically the marketing tool now,
he'll
third drivers used to do quite a bit more driving than they actually end up doing now. Basically, when you're signed as a third driver now, you are the face of the team's TikTok account.
No, and you bought it. That's a paid position, to my mind.
No,
think Ferrari are employing Zhou Guanyu to be their third driver? Come on, Chris.
But Mick never paid for it at Mercedes. There were tons who haven't done.
That's because they're nice and they wanted to look after him.
But the reason they want to have Joe is to have a bigger appeal in the Chinese market.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true. All right, and it could be keeping that warm for GM if they want that as a second driver option as well. But look, if he'd have been putting it in the wall every 5 minutes, that would be off the cards.
Oh yeah, no way.
Mm-hmm.
A bit like Logan, who will now be going into sports car racing as well.
So, Matt, I think that's our farewells. That's our farewells. Okay.
I like it. We like Bottas, we very much like Magnussen. We wish them well, and we may yet see Bottas boomerang his way with Cadillac back into the sport.
But also, we had a long time with quite a static F1 field, and so we've come to know and love all of them, really. So as they leave now, you go, oh, actually, that's a big part of our sport and our time gone, and we've got these kids. Who cares about kids? Bortoletto,
I love Bortoletto.
Antonelli. Who are these random names? It's like when you've been playing Championship Manager for a long time on PC, you know, like Football Manager or something like that, and you get all these just random kids' names coming through instead of the Premiership names that you know. None of these kids are going to make it.
No, I disagree. I think we're going to see this. But what we're looking at here, I'm glad you brought this up.
We're not going to do which
Why are we suddenly
rookies
seeing all these? This isn't even in the notes. I'm just literally making this up as we go. But I've been thinking about it. Why are we suddenly seeing, after all of this utterly static grid, why are we suddenly now seeing all these rookies in the sport the last year of a regulation set? And that's because it's probably the best time, because the cars are at their closest. It's going to be a truncated development season anyway. It is the best time to get new drivers into the sport, so they'll be ready for the battle in 26.
Yeah.
That's my argument.
Okay, counter. No, counter before Chris. Sorry, Chris. I'm going to say counter. 99% of the junior series drivers now are coming through with family money. So this is the best time to buy a Formula One seat, and they've got a lot more spending.
You can have that one.
The junior drivers now have got more spending power than the veterans. This is like Kurt Russell Soldier, 1996. The young guys coming through are armed with, talent, of course, but they're also armed with the money to finance their seats.
Well, nobody makes money their first year of Formula One. So that is just the case for everyone.
Hamilton.
Yeah, Hamilton's entire career was funded by McLaren since he was 13.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'm not talking about when you attract a sponsor or backing. I'm talking about specifically when your family is bringing money to your seat.
How much money is Bortoletto bringing?
Okay, hang on. Sorry, it's not like all junior drivers now just come from rich families. That just
it is.
Isn't.
Every single junior driver is bringing in family money, siphoned through some weird sponsor. That's the impression I have.
There's like two, right? Out of the 50 that race in F2 and F3,
there's no way it's 55. There's no way it's two. Only two are being funded by family money. There's no way
it's just like the most pessimistic view, and it's just not true.
As I'm reading a story today about a driver moving from Australia to Europe, their family sold everything they owned to move to Europe for several years in hopes that they would do well enough to get actual sponsorship. Yeah, there are drivers.
No. Chris is making the claim.
There are definitely drivers who do that. Bortoletto, as it turns out, won F2 in the last race of the season, Chris. Am I remembering this correctly? To get this drive. So
and first year as well, and won F3 first year.
As a rookie as well. So he's done what Piastri did a couple of years ago. And actually is coming into with more, on paper, more credit than Kimi Antonelli, for example. But obviously, Kimi's had more F1 testing opportunities, having been, hand-picked as Lewis Hamilton's replacement by Mercedes when he was like 10 years old.
Yeah, and we could even look at like Lawson, who essentially was about to abandon his F2 career and happened to win a race from the pit lane that Helmut Marko saw. And so they added him to the Red Bull Junior team, and that's why he's in the RB Visa cash out, give me more money thing.
Be defeated by Yuki Tsunoda. Let's go, Yuki. Look, we could have a broader conversation about this.
We haven't even talked about testing, but
I know we've got loads of time to talk about this specific argument, and I think we should go away, arm ourselves with info, and come in and have this head on. But I will just say, I dispute that you're saying that only two total drivers in F2, F3 are being funded by family money.
I just pulled that number out of my. I just pulled that number out of my head. Yeah, but you claimed all of them. You claimed every single one of them.
150% of all of them. Okay. So.
150% of all of them. I love this show.
Okay. So, Ferrari, Matt. We honestly, we criminally under-discussed Ferrari's 2024 season.
Well, we were discussing it kind of in the woulda, coulda, shoulda. And the problem with Ferrari is they actually did a really good job, more or less, all season long. So if you go looking for where was the hole, where could you put your finger on the pulse and say that right there, we can identify as the place where they gave up winning the Constructors' Championship, which for our purposes will now be by far the most important championship because we're talking about it. And they were really only 2 races. Canada, where they scored no points at all. If they'd scored, what was it like? If they just scored the minimum amount they normally scored in races on average, it wouldn't have even been close. They would have actually crushed McLaren for the Constructors' Championship. And the other one where they really weirdly underperformed, and we talked about that on the show, was Silverstone. So that done, there wasn't a lot to say, but there's a lot to say about Ferrari and what they're about to do and what they've done to poor old Carlos Sainz.
We've got loads of highlights, lowlights from people, and one of those is from Tyler, who says the lowlight for him was Leclerc's race in Montreal. So I had to go back and look up what happened. So you're citing that as a double 0 points. So they scored donuts. Leclerc, the one thing I remember from that was, didn't they end up on dry tyres when everyone else was on intermediates and then had an engine blowout?
No, he was on slicks when it was wet and then on inters when it was dry.
Right, yes. Oh. And Lewis Hamilton fans around the world can take that as a cautionary.
And that was the end of Chat GPT helping with strategy.
No, I'm learning the Italian national anthem so that when Lewis wins in Australia, first race, calling it right now, I can get up there and go Fratelli d'Italia and all that.
Sorry, I was just doing the Italian anthem for you.
Yes, we all heard.
It's the best national anthem.
Yeah, I looked up the translation the other day. So here you go. Brothers of Italy. Italy has awakened. Scipio's helmet she has put on her head. Scipio. Huh?
Scipio.
Is that how it's pronounced?
Scipio.
I've never heard it said out loud. I've only read it from my history stuff, looking at history. So that is Scipio Africanus, who won the Second Punic War against Carthage and beat Hannibal at Zama.
Yes, the Second Pubic War.
Punic War.
It's a Brooklyn Nine-Nine joke.
Okay. Let's see that. She put on her head, where is the victory? Offer her the hair, because slave of Rome, God created her. And the chorus is, let us unite. We are ready to die. Italy called.
It's very intense.
It's passionate. It is one of the most fun, the British national anthem.
It is one of the better anthems.
Dreary.
Yeah.
Boring.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll learn that. And also we have Pablo here, who said that a low light for him was Ferrari flubbing Barcelona upgrades, and a high was Ferrari uncharacteristically being able to recover from it. But yeah, this is the thing. The upgrade path has been a big weakness, Matt, for Ferrari. And I've always felt that they can come out of the box firing, but they don't tend to keep up in recent history with the likes of Red Bull and Mercedes.
And this is actually something, if you want to go back and listen to our last Tech Time podcast that Summers and I sort of discussed a bit at length, I'm not sure we can give them an A+ for pure development, but we can definitely give them an A+ for figuring their way out of a puzzle that other teams have taken far longer to. They figured out what went wrong, and they were bringing parts after they figured out what went wrong that were working actually quite well for them. And that is an unusual and positive sign if you're a Tifosi.
I think they also did it in the safest way, because when we talk about McLaren taking the fight to Red Bull, all the talk is about, the mini DRS and all these technical loopholes that they exploited that have now since been closed for the 2025 regs. Whereas no one's talking about anything that's been put on the Ferrari that you need to get rid of that as soon as possible. So I think if
skid blocks
of the I forgot about skid blocks.
Sorry, but I was looking at it because something I want to talk about with Summers, but it wound up coming out in the press that actually, even though it wasn't illegal and they were not the only team that needed to make this change, they did comment in the press that it actually cost them quite a bit of money to make it so rapidly.
Yeah.
And so, if you're putting your finger on where things might have also gone a little astray for them beating McLaren, that could be another one right there.
But correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
That change was it was implemented. So we had a few races where this skid block trick wasn't being used, right?
Yeah. No, that they had to implement it straight away, and that's what cost them money.
So there you go. So they were still a very, very rapid car, whereas nobody, I think, really knows where McLaren's going to be without this mini DRS. So I would say the safest bet for between Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari, the safest bet out of the three of them to come out of the blocks firing next year would be Ferrari.
And you know where I said I would correct you when you were wrong?
Go.
Yeah, go for it, please.
McLaren did indeed institute an updated rear wing that was compliant with what the FIA asked for. So they had done the last races without mini DRS. And yes, I know they've changed the slot gap regulations, and I could go find the numbers for you right now if you really want me to, but it's not going to mean anything
and
to anybody.
Did they have the performance they had when they were cheating?
Well, they still won in Abu Dhabi, didn't they?
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, one race, but wasn't there that period? What was that period where everyone was saying they had the best car by far? Was that true in the final 5 races when they couldn't have the mini DRS?
I don't think it was ever true, Spanners.
I know.
I don't think it was ever true.
I was being hyperbolic when I said when they were cheating. But the thing was, initially they said, oh no, it's only the low downforce rear wing that we're changing, and we're not changing it because we have to. We're changing it because of the goodness of our own hearts. And then it became apparent, I think, from what I've seen reported, that it was actually all the rear wings that they then had to adjust. So I think it's still a up in the air question. Did they manage to change away from having the mini DRS and still maintain the advantage that it gave them?
Also, what we got into, especially towards the end of the season, it was less about the updates that teams are bringing and just started coming down more to which tracks suit the fundamental characteristics of your car. Because you would go between Las Vegas to Qatar and Abu Dhabi, you've got 3 completely different types of track there where teams are going, oh yeah, this doesn't really suit our car, and then like still finish on the podium. So it's not just about now the upgrade you're bringing to the car, because all the teams are so evenly matched now at the front of the field. It's going to come down to specific characteristics.
Yeah, and this is an interesting thing to get into, because you could argue that we saw them in Las Vegas without the performance you'd expect, and you could put that down potentially to the rear wing. But if you look at the performance in Qatar and you look at the performance in Abu Dhabi, it's probably more due to the track temperatures than anything else. And the advantage McLaren had, like you can talk about, they've had a very efficient, and they've been able to run a fairly high amount of downforce relative to their rivals. But the big advantage they've had is in the longer stint of whatever 1 or 2 stop you're doing. They've had an advantage on the longer stint over the last half of the stint or so, because they have had the best tire management of anyone. And the question is, will they have that next season?
Are we talking about Ferrari now?
McLaren.
Oh, you
Ferrari,
got it back to, so not content with 2 hours on the last show about McLaren, it's now the Ferrari segment that you specifically requested and put show notes in. We're now back to McLaren.
Because that's the question for Ferrari versus McLaren is, I think, going to be that tire management in that stint.
Oh, now my turn to divert away from Ferrari before we go back. There was a bit of news that Mercedes had been struggling with rear tyre wear because of an axle, the kind of axle they used, and that they share it with Aston Martin, who have also suffered with the same rear degradation issue. So this might come up with Summers, who I believe is going to be on next week, but that's an interesting little tidbit.
They share it with Williams as well, don't they?
Well, they've been struggling with rear tyres being attached to the car by the end of the race. So, yeah. Sigh. Yeah, we can't use them as a data point, sadly.
No, okay. Let's sigh.
If we're going to talk Ferrari, I'm interested in their drivers. So, that's been a steady driver pairing for a while, and I would argue that Leclerc has been the stronger overall, but both have significant question marks over things. But we're in a unique position where we've been talking about these two drivers in a relatively stable position outside of a championship fight, largely, apart from the beginning of 2022. But we're going to get almost immediate answers about this because Sainz is off to compare himself against Alex Albon, and Leclerc is about to be tested by a Lewis Hamilton of, at the moment, unknown condition. So this is Schrodinger's Hamilton that Leclerc is facing. He was either suffering from doing all the testing with Mercedes parts and being subjected to being the number 2 driver and being outside of driver meetings, etc., or he's facing an aging Lewis Hamilton who's probably still really, really fast and might do quite well at a missed Apex go-karting event, but might not be at that very, very top level. So we're going to see sort of instant answers, I think, to our questions. And by instant, I mean throughout the course of the season. But both drivers have suspicions where we go, they're both brilliant. I think like both teams, both drivers would be signed by many, many teams. These guys are both fantastic. So with Sainz, I think the argument is that he might be a little peaky. And with Leclerc, there's question marks about whether he's able to play a high percentage game. So I think maybe he's low percentage. So he's like, let's go all out, but it works a lower percentage of time. Does that make sense? Is that different to the peaky, Matt? I think
he's never had to think about the big picture, has he?
It's tough for me because I would actually argue, and I was going to abuse some statistics to do it, that Sainz was clearly the better driver here because we've had 19 pole positions from Leclerc and he's won 6 times, whereas Carlos, admittedly not as fast on raw pace, has had 6 pole positions and he's won 4 times. But that is an abuse of statistics. And I'll admit it right up front.
No, that's fine. No, I appreciate what you're saying there. So you could argue it the other way, that you could say a car that isn't really capable of winning, regardless of where you qualify, Leclerc has been able to put it on pole more times.
Yeah.
You could argue that.
And of course, there's no connection between how many pole positions they've had that they've gone on to win. That's what's not actually presented, and that's why it's such an abuse. But it's an interesting look at, I think, what makes the difference between these two drivers is that Leclerc needs to drive in a way that puts him right in that like 1/10 percentage of going over the line. He can't leave himself much margin in order to be fast.
That's my perception.
And I think
also.
Sainz is the exact opposite.
Yeah, even though the result is the same, where it's any given weekend, we don't know which side of each driver we're going to see. It's for very different reasons. So it's for example, everything's about tennis at the moment because I'm obsessed. So Leclerc is going for exactly putting it on the line and that big serve, and it's low percentage. Whereas with Sainz, I get the feeling that he's trying different things, like maybe with his setup, or maybe his driving style is suited to certain weekends. So there's some weekends where the thing he is doing is suitable for the track and the conditions, and then so he's peaky in that way, and then more times that puts him just behind where Leclerc is, whereas Leclerc is giving it full beans and not playing that percentage game.
I mean, I think the argument I would make there is that Sainz is much better at understanding the absolute limit of the car, and he will give himself enough margin to not kick it over the edge. I mean, he will obviously sometimes. He's not perfect. He's crashes. Brazil is a great example. But Leclerc will put himself ahead by not knowing exactly where the limit is, or by going just slightly over it. And I think we see this with their tire management and stuff like this. But the argument I really want to make about Sainz, and I think this is the one that's going to get you, is that I think he is, of every Formula One driver today, including Hamilton, he's the best value-added driver a team could sign. And here's my argument. When he was at Renault, he started in 2016. They were P9 in the constructors. When he left at the end of 2018, they were 4th. When he started at McLaren, they were 6th. When he left, they were 3rd. When he started at Ferrari, they were 6th, and he's leaving now, and they're 2nd, and almost won the darn thing. He may be the magic sauce in your Formula One team. He's not going to give you a Leclerc or Hamilton, I win everything all the time, but there's a lot of evidence that he does good
evidence
for the team.
is there. Okay, so everybody now go to www.knowyourlogicalfallacyis.com and search for Texas sharpshooter fallacy. If you'd have said that beforehand, if you'd have said those things beforehand, look out for those, the difference between when they started and where they finished in regards to driver. But that feels like anomaly hunting to me, pattern hunting.
It feels like anomaly hunting, but it's those three teams from 2016 to 2024, different teams in a row. And now maybe the teams would have improved without him. But I think it's reasonable to assume that he had at least some part in their improvement. And that could be technical feedback. It could be strategically where we've seen him on track, realize the team makes strategy errors and gets them to reverse their decisions so they have better performances, without necessarily being the fastest driver on raw pace in the team.
Yeah, I mean, he did definitely arrive at McLaren right before their big resurgence and then joined Ferrari at a time when they were in the doldrums. So I'm not entirely convinced it's down to him. But
I'm not saying it's solely him, but I'm saying he's been, one team, I think you can make the argument it's just that's luck. Two teams, you can say that's probably luck. Three teams out of 10 in a Formula One world, and you're like, okay, so we're getting to the point where it's going to be really hard to prove it one way or the other, but there might be something to it.
Maybe. And he's definitely arriving at Williams at a time where they are supposedly moving forwards.
Yeah.
And I think Williams is already going to be in a better position when they have two drivers that can score points on a regular basis and not chuck it into the wall.
Yes.
So that is immediately going to help.
Yeah. Well, this is, we're going to talk about other drivers, I think, too, maybe if we get to other highlights. But I think the Williams was the hardest car to drive on the grid by a long shot this season. And I say that not because the Colapentos and Sargents regularly did manage to crash it, but even Albon really had a hard time. I think the car was entirely unpredictable in a way that meant it was inevitable you were going to crash it a lot. And I think that's a lot of what we saw with the Williams performances this season, both from Albon and Sargent and Colapinto.
Maybe, I don't know. It's so hard to...
You just have to say no and start arguing before you know what you're going to say. Otherwise, you're never going to replace spinners.
that's what I do. Matt says something. If I haven't been listening, I say, I fundamentally disagree and just try and take the argument away. I have been caught taking a comfort break, but I assume we're talking about Ferrari and that we've finished. That's been my tactic all season, is when Matt starts going off on one about Carlos Sainz, that's when I take my break.
And that's fine. I do have their head-to-head stats for the whole time if you're interested. If there's any that you'd like to know.
Okay, tell you what, you do a stat here, and then I'll return with my point about a stat with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell.
Yeah. Well, which stat would you like? Points across 4 seasons?
Stop! You're triggering
Podiums?
Me. Yes. Okay, points across 4 seasons.
Points across 4 seasons, as we all know. That's going to be what's our Hamilton rule now? Is it across all seasons win, or is it each season matters?
I'll come to that, Matthew.
Okay, all right. Well, in this case, we're gonna have to hand the W to good old Charlie Leclerc because he had 1,029 points versus Carlos, who scored amazingly 900.5.
So we can conclude from that.
No, I mean, we're looking at we're just building context for how they did against each other over 4 years.
Well, if you want the context, they're all in Leclerc's favor, aren't they? It wins, points, podiums, pole positions, race head-to-head, quali head-to-head, laps led, fastest laps, and DNFs.
You are wrong.
Which one am I missing?
Sainz absolutely wins DNFs. He had 11.
Yeah, but that's not the one you want to win.
You're a horrible human being. But okay, yeah.
I really am.
Okay, so the last thing I think on Ferrari is Carlos Sainz is obviously a fantastic driver capable of great results. So the narrative for defending Carlos Sainz is always the ignore. And I think if you want to make the case to me that Ferrari favoured Leclerc over Carlos Sainz in various ways and with various strategy things, I agree. That happened. And Carlos Sainz had to come on the radio and literally tell them to stop inventing a phrase that is so commonly used in my house now that my wife yelled at me 3 weeks ago and told me specifically to stop telling her that she's inventing. I mean, she was inventing, but she was like, you need to stop telling me that I'm inventing. But you are inventing. But the kids use that now. So he specifically had to say that because they were manufacturing a way for him to have to not attack Leclerc, I think, was what it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so it was the pit stops at Silverstone, and yeah.
So look, I think Leclerc was the number one driver, and there will be an inherent advantage in that. But the logic that Sainz fans have used to say no, actually, he is better than Leclerc, is that when that good weekend comes around, they've given it far too much weight, and then ignored the next 4 or 5 races where Leclerc has been comfortably on top.
Well, I don't know if comfortably is the right word, because I feel like when he's not beating Leclerc, they are still quite evenly.
They're still so even.
Matched.
Yeah, there's one of the most evenly matched team pairings.
100%.
Yeah.
It's one of, if not the best lineup of the 2020. Oh no, actually.
Well, but we'll see. We'll see. Right. Okay. If Carlos Sainz goes and handsomely dominates Albon, which I fully expect.
I think he will. Yeah.
And Leclerc comfortably is on top of a Lewis Hamilton at the end of his career, which is
that won't happen.
It's a possibility.
No,
Chris.
No. Is it a possibility? Yes.
It is.
How probable is it? Is it 50%?
Yeah. Is it
70%?
realistic?
The thing that I would point out, the problem for Leclerc, where he falls down, is that consistency in races. His driving style means that he's got to be on the ragged edge. And what is the one area we've seen Hamilton still have it over George Russell, also someone who's very fast, clearly won all the qualifyings. In the race, his consistency and his ability to manage those tires, to feel them, is unparalleled. And I don't think a lot of that has gone away from Hamilton yet.
Yeah.
Look, if we get to next season and Hamilton still can't qualify in the same way as he has been with Mercedes, it's over. It's over. Leclerc is going to beat Hamilton. If Hamilton's qualifying like he has been this season, next season in a Ferrari, Leclerc has him. Hands down. He's perfectly fine in a race. He's not going to burn his tyres up week in, week out. He's going to beat Lewis Hamilton on points on that performance. If the qualifying thing goes away, I think it's game on. And I'm not as a Hamilton fan. I'm a massive Hamilton fan. If it turns out that Hamilton at 39 or 40 isn't quite as good over a season as Charles Leclerc, that is not, to me, going to ruin his legacy. It's not even going to make me upset. I like Leclerc an awful lot. I rate Leclerc an awful lot. But if Hamilton goes in there and starts really getting on top of a really, really fancied superstar driver and takes a title challenge and goes and takes it to the likes of, I think it will be Red Bull and maybe McLaren, then that will be a massive, massive bonus. If this was 8 years ago and he was going up against Leclerc, I would be expecting an absolute thumping and I'd be disappointed if it didn't happen. But I'm quite chill about what happens between those two next season.
In year 2 of them being teammates as well, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here.
Sure.
But talking about his ability to just maintain pace in the race, what I think you're also going to see from him as well is his ability to go wheel to wheel without relying on DRS, because of course we won't have DRS in 26 either. And suddenly I think you're going to see Alonso and Hamilton, all the people who raced in the pre-DRS days. They're like, yeah, I remember how to go toe to toe without having to just rely on a button.
Verstappen will be okay as well, I think.
Well, you say that, but he has so little single seater.
Actually, that's an interesting point that you bring up there. I just was going to make the very general point that what is Hamilton's biggest strength right now is also Leclerc's biggest weakness, and I think that's why the Ferrari pairing will be fascinating to watch.
Yeah. Oh man, so you two are still in your minds. You think Hamilton's going to go there and and beat Leclerc? You
I
seem
don't
fairly
know, but
confident.
I'm just saying the opportunity exists because what
Yeah.
Hamilton is best at and is still closest to his peak at is the thing that Leclerc struggles with the most across a race weekend.
I think it could go either way.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But the big deciding factor is Ferrari does favour one driver over another. So who do they favour, Leclerc or the driver they're paying 450 million for?
I was going to say, they didn't just pay all that money just to make sure Lewis comes home second.
They will
to
look
Charlie.
so dumb. They'll look dumb if Leclerc beats Hamilton on that money. It will look like a bad call. Not dumb. That's harsh. But it would look like a bad call, wouldn't it? And everyone likes to make it that they did a good call.
Hey, look, as long as they're winning races and fighting for, and if it wins them the Constructors' Championship, fully justified decision.
And the bulk of that money really comes to Hamilton for his ambassador, for his post F1 career. They're not just investing in Hamilton to be a racer for a season or two for them. They said, oh, look, we have the opportunity to have someone like Lewis represent us to the larger world for the rest of his life.
For the rest
Why
of his
would
life.
we say no to that at that price? It's a bargain.
Dude, they will have like Lewis. Suddenly, everyone's a Ferrari fan that are Lewis Hamilton fans. You've got like the
How much merch do you think they're going to ship based on
But the
this?
driver with the biggest footprint outside of Formula One, representing Ferrari, and Zhou Guan Yu giving them all the good Chinese money. Ferrari are going to be raking it in.
Oh, Ferrari,
know.
who have traditionally and historically struggled for money
Been
in
poor,
the field
yes.
of Formula One. Last Hamilton thing before I give Matt the opportunity to whinge about Alpine and we do a quick fire through the listeners' highlights and lowlights, is this statistic that Lewis Hamilton destroyed George Russell over 3 seasons. So I believe the statistics are that Lewis Hamilton scored 697 points to George Russell's 695 points, which, as we know, the only statistic that counts is the combined points over 3 seasons. Because for the last 174 years, we've had people going, yeah, actually, Jenson Button actually beat Lewis Hamilton over the course of 3 seasons on points. Whereas, if you look at performances where both the drivers were operating at a certain level, you go, who would you want to be your driver to go and chase a title out of Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton? I think most people are going to say, I would pick Lewis Hamilton. That's nothing against Jenson Button, but Hamilton won the first season together, then the second season, his head completely went and got completely lost, which not doing that in itself is a plus for Jenson Button. But then in the third season, he beat Jenson Button on points there and was a contender for the championship when you could argue that Jenson Button wasn't. Okay, so that's fine. I think that's the way that played out. But people have been hammering this statistic for years that it's the 3-season total that counts. Now, I didn't care whether Lewis Hamilton beat George Russell over 3 seasons on points or not, except for this one thing. Had he not made that overtake on George Russell, people would have been, for the next 10 years, saying, well, actually, George Russell beat Lewis Hamilton over points over 3 seasons. But I've even seen people dare have the gall to go, yeah, but it's 2-1 Russell. Pick a lane, haters.
But Spanners, if George hadn't been disqualified
Spa.
from Spa,
I don't like revisiting these, but I feel like I need to have the Spa thing again because so many people have been in my Instagram and TikTok comments. Go and follow Missed Apex on TikTok, Spanners Ready on Instagram, and saying, yeah, but he had that. Russell was robbed at Spa. No, he wasn't robbed at Spa. He threw away a 6th place by running an illegal tactic.
It wasn't Russell.
The team threw away
The
6th place.
team
He
made a
didn't lose a
mistake.
win. He didn't lose a win. He lost the 6th place that he would have finished
He
in
was
had he picked it
racing
again.
an illegal car, people. Sorry.
and it's almost as if the pace would have been, better with the illegal car.
Imagine that. Do you remember that year that McLaren put their floor or wing or something on upside down and they were so fast the first day of testing? Everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's like Braun all over again. I can't believe it. And then they came out and said, yeah, that meant the whole car was like supremely illegal.
Which
and
it
they
can
put
be
on
in
normally,
testing.
and they were just like mid.
Yeah, but in testing it can be illegal as well. So that's they didn't break
Not required.
any rules there. But yeah, Russell was basically running a tactic that wasn't valid. And once you're disqualified, it doesn't matter. So you could equally point to 2023 Circuit of the Americas, where I think he came P2, Hamilton, and had his underfloor.
Oh yeah, the plank wear.
Yeah, he had the plank wear. So he was running.
They did that to Haas.
So he was running a setup
yeah.
there that wasn't worthy of the 18 points because it got disqualified. It's exactly the same for George Russell. But again, I don't care because all of these things need context. Because you could have a season where, okay, Russell was better in the first season, but Mercedes were the P2 car. And then Hamilton could be better for the next 2 seasons with that car being a midfield car. And then you'd say that George Russell was the better driver because of the 3-year total. All of those stats, if you are a slave to those stats, you are always going to be on the wrong side of the argument.
Just vibes. Just go off
exactly.
of
Just
vibes.
go off
Vibes all the way down.
My thing is, which driver would you sign? So look at that total, and based on, like, take away age from it, because I think that is a factor. Which driver would you sign the next season out of Button and Hamilton? Out of Russell and Hamilton? Which driver would you legitimately sign for your title-winning car?
Well, if I was Lucas di Grassi, I would not be.
I would not be saying much.
Lucas di Grassi, you mean one of our favourite drivers from the team that is run by friend of the show, Mark Preston?
Look, this is
So let's be careful,
right? So
Lucas. Lucas is so great, even though he unfollowed me on Twitter. Lucas
is more than entitled to that opinion. And to be honest, the points he made were valid. I don't necessarily agree with them. But, you know, and yes, obviously, friend of the show, you know, Mark Preston and Lucas di Grassi, who was our first, you know, interview when we relaunched the Formula E show, which you can still go and check out.
And you're about to slam him. Chris Stevens slams Lola driver Lucas di Grassi. That's the title of the show, and all the TikToks are just this clip.
And it's going to be the headline on Essentially Sports when the intern is back typing up another one of our podcasts.
Stop quoting Missed Apex as a source. We are not a source of information. Do not ever quote us on anything written.
Yeah, Derek, talking to you. Anyway, that was
it was a trash take. He knows what he's doing. He's doing it to get lots of likes and clicks and stuff like that. And so from that point of view, it's smart, but it was a trash take and we all know it.
Right. Matt.
Yes.
You're upset.
Well, yeah, I am upset. I'm upset by lots of things. There are clouds outside in the sky. They need to be yelled at.
Yeah.
No one's yelling at them. This is terrible.
The limitations of our existential existence are an insult to our humanity. That, for example.
Yes, they are. It's ridiculous.
But mostly you're upset at Briatore.
I am, because I discovered it, and as I'm sure everyone's very well aware, post Qatar, there was a big kerfuffle. Turned out Ocon wouldn't do the last race for Alpine, that Doohan would step up, which everyone, you know, we like Jack Doohan, so I'm glad he got the opportunity. But it seems very unusual to be finding out about it in such a fashion. And essentially, the story that I read, and this is a motorsport.com article, was that it basically the Briatore told them that the price for Esteban doing the Haas test right after Abu Dhabi was that he wasn't allowed to race Abu Dhabi, and that he only was told that. He was only told that right before the race, and he'd already had a special tribute helmet to the team made, and that in fact the deal with Oaks and Komatsu was several weeks old, where they had agreed to release Esteban so he could go and do the Haas testing. That had been on the books for several weeks. And then right before the Qatar race, they said, oh, by the way, this is your last race with the team if you really want to go drive for Haas after Abu Dhabi. And it's just, I think, I'm going to use the word shabby treatment for the person who meant that you won 6th place in the Constructors' Championship by his performance in Brazil.
I would say petty would be another good word.
Okay. Do we have a word from Spanners?
Alpine.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
It's just,
is it though? It just once it was Ocon that made the decision to go, though, isn't it? And I think that once one party initiates the divorce and the lawyers get involved, it starts getting a little petty.
No, he was planning to drive until he was told right before Qatar that if he drove Abu Dhabi, they wouldn't release him to the test.
He chose that he was leaving for Haas.
That had nothing to do with him not driving at Abu Dhabi. That was set up. That was agreed to weeks before Qatar.
No, what I mean is the decision to change teams at all. And so once, like Hamilton, once you say, I'm going to Ferrari, then obviously you've made the argument about how Hamilton would have been shielded from decisions and becomes less important to the team. Does Ocon not suffer from that as well?
Yeah, he does. In fact, one thing I did learn reading Summer's articles, which, by the way, you should go read them. You learn things, was that the front wing Pierre Gasly had in Qatar was not available to Ocon, but that they did manage to produce it for Jack Doohan in the final race at
that is
what a surprise.
That is pretty petty.
I just, I mean, these are just facts, things that I learned. I'm not asking you to draw conclusions from them necessarily.
Can I just point out that I don't read any tech articles because elderly American tends to explain them to me periodically. So
yes, I do enjoy that.
I'm kind of annoyed that they ended up getting sixth in the Constructors' Championship because it doesn't feel like they really earned it. But like, one great result. Don't get me wrong. Fantastic day for them. Doesn't really warrant finishing 3 places higher, was it, than where they were before that weekend, where they probably should have been. Yeah. Bearing in mind they started the season with the worst, car on the grid.
So yeah, I'm well aware that we haven't got to the listener highlights, lowlights that I've been promising for 2 weeks. So I'm going on holiday on Thursday. On Tuesday, I will sit and I'm the best one anyway. I'll sit and do a Spanner's solo one addressing these, and I'll ask for more in our Patreon Discord as well. And then on Sunday, I think we've got a Tech Time season review.
Potentially.
Okay,
yeah.
So I'm meeting Summers, I think on Sunday, in the Isle of Wight, where he lives, because my wife has family there, but I won't have my equipment with me. So but after that, so I'll send Summers to you as drunk as possible so that he can reveal the insider stuff that he's not supposed to.
Are we going to do it on the actual Sunday? Okay.
Oh, maybe. We'll see how it goes.
We'll
whatever day you're recording, I'll try to meet him in the pub that day and send him to you as lubricated as possible.
Properly seasoned.
Mark has asked about Alpine if this is an argument for points all the way down the grid. And
yes,
I think it is.
That's the exact point I wanted to make. Yes, go for it, Chris.
Yeah. No, if they've been getting those points for the 15th, 16th, whatever places they were getting before Brazil, then you will end up with a much more representative. Maybe it would have bumped them up 1 place in the championship as a result, but you would still have a much more representative season overview of each team's performance, especially those who are not regular top 10 or actually not even top 10. If you're not consistently in the top 5, then your championship is made by one mega result.
When you've got 4 teams that are clear of the rest of them.
Exactly.
And so you've got
top 8.
So you've got 7 drivers that are occupying the best points positions. So look, as a Tsunoda fan, and this is a whole different, argument and topic that we could have, he scored something like 3 or 4 11th places in a row, and they were all good performances where he outperformed his teammate. None of that was rewarded at all. Yeah. And even if you had, I know things could get super complicated, but even if you had real points and shadow points, just so that you could have something that rewards. But why not?
Fine. I'll go work that out for a future show.
Okay, but even 25 points is meaningless. It's just a number. So you could have a scale that makes shadow points. So you could say, okay, let's have 250 points for a win. 250 points for a win. 180 for second place. And then it could get exponentially smaller to whatever scale you want after 10 points. And so you could kind of go, it's not ruining the championship to say, well, in fact, if you finish 15th, you're still picking up 20 points.
The point to make, and you're on it, is that it will be fair for the midfield teams, because right now a single random act can vault someone 4 or 5 positions up. Now, EJ makes a very good point. It's actually kind of great for the team members at Alpine who've been working so hard to get a really good result. But the problem we have is that the rewards, the glory is all going to go to the management of Alpine, which is Briatore and previously Bruno Famine, are going to take a lot of credit for this that they don't really deserve. That was very much in the hands of the actual team, the strategists and the drivers and the mechanics and everybody else who worked so hard to try and make that car better, because they got a lot better across the course of the season.
1,000%. The only worry I have about like the much bigger number for the win is that suddenly you have one DNF and that is just, it can ruin a championship like really, really quickly. And so like, yeah, it massively rewards consistency, but I don't know. I think it's there's a case that's been made that ever since we went to 25 points for a win, it's been way too easy for drivers to build up mammoth leads in the championship that then you have no championship fight at all, because it's happened a lot more since that era.
What's the solution, Chris?
Oh, somewhere in the middle. I'm
points
not
all
the
the
one.
way down.
Points all
Or
the
at
way
least
down.
to points to 16th.
We
that.
in our iRacing series, I've lost track of
We
what
had
we
points
did.
down to like 30.
No, but we also we just had 1 point for every car you beat. So if there's 25 cars and you finish first, you get 24 points. So you can do whatever you want. You can make it up.
Yeah.
Yes, you
Oh,
can.
yeah, of course you can.
You could, even if you really wanted to do something impressive, Chris, you could be the voiceover star of a Mercedes social media post.
Oh, you.
You've just done the coolest thing ever, Chris. What happened? Explain to us. Right, this was a Lewis Hamilton like goodbye post from Mercedes, and it's your voice
Petronas.
from Petronas, and it's your voice all over it. Why?
Because I was asked to provide some sort of dub commentary for the.
It wasn't real. It wasn't at the time.
No, clearly. So obviously they had everything like sort of ready to go, and they're like, we want a bit of commentary, and so I provided them with varying levels of escalation in terms of the excitement with the lines that they provided.
I love that. We will definitely make sure that is in the show notes so people can see you at your best.
It was very much thanks to listener of the show Alex Johnsma and his Praxima outfit, who were the ones helping to make that video.
And where else can people find you?
I am at Chris on Racing on so on X, when I
Well, so
remember
much
to post
now,
on there
yeah.
because I'm mostly posting on Blue Sky now. Between the two, it's more on Blue Sky. If you're on Blue Sky, give me a follow there. Sometimes I do TikTok. Threads I've completely forgotten has existed now ever since Blue Sky came out. The main one, I guess, is Instagram. So go and follow me there.
Oh, I don't follow you on Instagram. I'm so sorry.
Still!
I'm sorry. But if Matt includes it in the show notes, I will click there and I will
Good man.
go and follow you. I'm very, very sorry. I'm the same as you. I've given up on Facebook and Threads, but I'm much more active on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts, where I'm doing 1-minute videos. And I've discovered, I think, a format that works just in time for the season to end. However, I'm going to do many a week, and it will be the same content across YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and Instagram. So TikTok is at Missed Apex F1, Instagram is Spanners Ready, and YouTube is Missed Apex F1. And Matt, you have some exciting news as well. I've been flogging this book, this smut, The Fast and the Curious, for ages now.
And the Reckless.
Even though Fast and the Reckless, even though it goes against everything, it goes against everything of all my media personality of like super squeaky clean BBC Spanners. But I've been promoting this mummy and daddy special get together time book. What's the news?
Well, we have the cover of the second book has been dropped on Instagram. And if you'd like to see what the second book cover is going to look like, you can go check it out on my wife's Instagram, which I will also put in the show notes.
Excellent. And if you want to follow me, which you should, I think I've said all the things, consider supporting us at patreon.com/missedapex. I am going to do this listener highlights midweek, and then I think we'll do the tech time for the weekend. But broadly speaking, it is going to be one show a week now until we get into testing, which is, I think, going to be adequate and suitable and still give you an F1 fix, because I know most of the F1 podcasts do just sack it. So if you've got friends that listen to other F1 podcasts that don't do content over the winter, point them over to Missed Apex and say to them, oh, they'll just keep you company over the winter, and then we'll trick them, you see. We'll draw them in, and then when Australia rolls around, they'll stay with us.
There's no launch season now because it's all just one event.
When is it?
So it's not like we can even talk about, I don't know.
Are we not going? Are we not going?
I know when it is.
They're not going to have the real cars at that thing, so don't get your hopes up. It's just a livery reveal for all the teams at the same time.
That's all most of these events are anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. Well,
I have highlights and lowlights as well, Spanners. Can I come and do the one on
well, I was
Tuesday?
going to do it by myself.
That's boring.
Fine, Chris will come and join me. We will see you then for our highlights, lowlights from you guys, and we'll look out in our mailbag. So if you send an email to feedback@missedapex.net or spanners@missedapex.net, then we'll include that in our highlights, lowlights. Until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast Season Review Part 2 of... When does the next season start?
In
What, March?
that sounds good to me.
I wonder if the clouds will have cleared by then in the UK. Where are you, sun, life giver? Why have you forsaken us?